Okay, of course, we have some unexpected technical issues, as you could have noticed, inevitable probably. So I will not waste much time now to do a lot of introductions because already Francesca Albanese is joining us, is already waiting to start. So we don't want to waste too much of her time and anybody else. So I will just welcome you all here, and it's great that you came. And even if we have difficulties a bit with sound, well, let's try to, we do the best that we can. Neve's computer will play the sound, and here at least you can see who is speaking. Okay, so it will be a conversation between Neve Gordon, that is here, and Francesca Albanese, that is there, and Paola Rivetti will be chairing this, that you can see her on the screen. And yes, so let's do that, and after I'll say all the other stuff that needs to be said. But let's enjoy this. Thank you all, and sorry, and I thank you for your patience.
So hi everyone, thanks Elian for the nice introduction. My name is Paola Rivetti. I'm speaking because I'm currently I'm the chair of the Pedagogy and Outreach Committee of BRISMES and the BRISMES Council member. So welcome to our webinar, The Question of Palestine in International Perspective. This will be a conversation between Neve Gordon, the Vice President of BRISMES, and Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur. But before introducing our speakers, let me thank, first of all, Amy Brickhill, who's the manager of BRISMES, the real mastermind behind everything actually that we do. The London School of the London South Bank University, and in particular the Race and Gender and Sexuality Research Group and the Crime, Harm and Justice Research Group, which is co-organizing this webinar with us, and all the other members of the Outreach and Pedagogy Committee at BRISMES. I would like to remind you that we have another webinar next week. If you're interested, please join us to remember Sarah Ejazi, Queer Mourning and Militancy in the MENA, in the Middle East and North Africa, taking place next Wednesday between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. London time, of course. You have a chat box for our online audience. If you want to ask questions, you're very welcome to do so. We will read the questions after the conversation. Let me now introduce our speakers. They're very well known, but still. So we're very, very happy to have two very distinguished speakers with us. Francesca Albanese, who was appointed as the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, appointed in March 2022 and taking function or office in May 2022. She is a lawyer by training, specialized in human rights. She is an affiliate scholar at the Institute for the Study of International Migration at Georgetown University, as well as a senior advisor on migration and forced displacement for a think tank, the Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development. She has widely published on the legal situation in Israel and the state of Palestine, and her book, Palestinian Refugees in International Law, co-authored with Lex Tackenberg, is considered a milestone in refugee academic literature. She regularly teaches and lectures on international law and forced displacement at universities across Europe and the Arab region. Francesca Albanese has also worked as a human rights expert for the United Nations, including the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the UN Relief and Work Agency for Palestine Refugees. Neve Gordon is a professor of international law and human rights at Queen's Mary University of London, and the vice president of the British Society for Middle East Studies. He is the author of several books, including Israel's Occupation, The Human Rights to Dominate with Nicola Perugini, and Human Shields, A History of People in the Land of Fire with Nicola Perugini as well. He writes regularly for the popular press, and his articles have appeared in The Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Al Jazeera, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and the London Review of Books. With no further ado, on my end, I would like to welcome our audience, both online and offline, and leave the floor to our speakers.
Thank you, Paola. Do you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so much. Last night, Francesca tweeted about this event and tagged me. And this morning I got up to about 50 messages of "you should die, bitch," and things like that. So this is the kind of atmosphere I think that Francesca has been working in since she entered this position. Anyone that tries to speak up and say things about Israel-Palestine immediately gets delegitimized and threatened and so forth. And this is part of the game. But since we are starting very late, I'd like to just go in there and begin with the questions. And I'd like to basically ask Francesca 2 lines of questions, one about her previous report and one about the report that will come out in the next, I think, few weeks. So my first question, Francesca, who's joining us from Tunis right now, is your first report is about self-determination of the Palestinians. Why did you choose this topic? What were your major claims in the report? And how was the report received?
Thank you very much, Neve. Can you hear me? Yeah, without echo. As you started mentioning the fact that I had tweeted about it, I was expecting you to blame me for the bad luck that I brought to the event with all the technicalities. No. But yeah, of course, as you say, whomever has the privilege to deal with Israel and Palestine gets a thick skin and very low sensitivity vis-a-vis insults, blasphemies, and other kind of not particularly nice treatment. But however, my report. So yes, I started my mandate last year, and I knew from the very beginning that I had to focus on the right of self-determination for a number of reasons, because it's a right which is central. It's essential, it's foundational. Self-determination is the collective right par excellence, I often say. And it's as central to the question of Palestine as misunderstood. So in three very quick points. Even before I started, I took office as a special rapporteur, I realized through my engagement with the diplomatic communities that there was a very deep, profound, and unsettling sense of misunderstanding vis-a-vis what is this right? Because I would have senior and seasoned diplomats telling me, yeah, but the Palestinians have their state. Okay, it still have to figure out a few things, but there is a state in progress, as if there was a natural equation between self-determination and statehood, and whatever it means. The other element of confusion is that people were somewhat expecting that self-determination be an outcome of negotiation. And this is something that this is the second reason that pushed me to focus on this, right? Self-determination can wait the end of the so-called conflict between Israelis and the Palestinians in order to be realized. And the third element is that there is let me go back to the second. Also, the wall-to-wall consensus that has formed in the human rights community in Israel, Palestine, and beyond, that Israel is practicing a regime of apartheid and it's committing the crimes against humanity of apartheid, has somewhat circumvented the question of self-determination, as if that was a political issue. Third element is that there is a question, an increasing reference to the question of Palestine as settler colonial and unaccomplished decolonization. And this is not new. The question of Palestine has historically, if you look at the UN records, it has always been discussed as a missed decolonization process. So the question is, how it has happened that the debate regarding the meaning of self-determination has gone so off track. And this is why I said we need to start from that, because the legal basis to undo settler colonialism is the right of self-determination. So I explained in very legal terms a right that is, it has its logical asperities, I would say. It's not easy to grasp, but in very, very simple terms, the right of self-determination is the right of a people to be free politically, so to determine its political will, to decide to decide its own politics and policies. It's the right to be free economically, meaning to enjoy the economic resources, land, water, whatever is underneath the soil, and air, every resource pertaining to a given territory. And third, the right to enjoy and to express a sense of community through culture, and not to be exposed to cultural erasure. And last but not least, the right to exist on a given territory. All this, it's made impossible in the land that has been recognized in the 22% of historic Palestine, meaning whatever of historic Palestine doesn't constitute Israel, and that it's recognized internationally not only as occupied. And this, I'm saying that for all those not very bright minds who keep on saying, why do you refer to this as occupied? Because it's occupied. Take the time to read one of the hundreds of UN resolutions that exist on the topic, and you will see it's occupied because the use of force as a method to acquire territory has disappeared from international law since centuries. This doesn't belong to the modern order anymore. And therefore, the land that Israel occupied in 1967 remains occupied and colonized. Why do I say so? Because Israel, in that piece of land, maintain colonies, fragment and seize land for the colonies and its alleged military purposes. The resources of that land are used for the benefit of Israel, the colonies, and other third parties, businesses. And third, because there is an erasure, an attempted erasure, of Palestinianness in the occupied Palestinian territory, with the repression, which is evident in the repression of every symbol of Palestinian identity, being it a flag, a school curriculum, a cultural venue, cultural and political activities. Experts have been talking of de-Palestinization for a few years already, and I see how it's happening and why it is to be denounced. But also there has been an attempt to interfere, inject, alter, and damage the formation of a Palestinian polity, the expression of political will, the formation of political will. And think of the last extreme, the criminalization of 411 organizations, all major parties, charities, human rights organizations. There is an impossibility to carry out a life. So this is what I wrote my first report about. And I concluded saying the only way to resolve this situation, to dismantle apartheid, is to dismantle the occupation and its conceptual underpinning. Why does Israel maintain a military occupation which in nature cannot be legal if not temporary and not justified by military necessity? Israel calls military necessity the necessity to maintain and expand its annexation of occupied land. I mean, where do we start commenting on this illegality? Because there is something against the state of Israel is just wanting the application of international law without double standards and exceptions. And this is why I recommended very simply to start stopping, to stop looking at this situation as if it was a conflict, because it's a military occupation which practices apartheid and it's underpinned by settler colonial aims, and align third state actors with the law of state responsibility. So do not recognize the illegal acts and its consequences that Israel puts in place, and consider not aid and abet any of these, and consider the measures afforded by the UN Charter, Neve, which are political, economic, and diplomatic. And there is no way out here without respecting international law in the interest of both Palestinians and Israelis. This is what my first report is about.
And how was it received?
It depends whom you ask, because I think it was quite well received. I was surprised because I was prepared. I mean, I had people very close to me saying, but can you focus on something else that looks less boring than the right of self-determination? But I was surprised because it was very well received by the very people I somewhat had, and not very intentionally, but I had somewhat criticized. The humanitarians, for example, whom I said, yeah, but you cannot keep on using aid as a solution in itself. Otherwise, it becomes Band-Aid aid. I mean, there is a tendency to treat Palestine as an emergency, providing humanitarian aid over humanitarian aid. But in fact, it's a political situation to solve in line with international law and not a perpetual humanitarian emergency. So it's the political deficit that creates the humanitarian emergency. So there was a very good reception among in the diplomatic community and civil society, and also scholars have been invited everywhere to share the contents of the report, the finding. It has been very well received by, I would say, both Palestinians and Israelis, those who are, I mean, it has created, of course, some tension in certain Israeli communities, because they say, why do you talk about the right of self-determination of the Palestinians and not ours? Because it's not either or, but the Israelis have realized the right of self-determination, whatever you envisage it, both as statehood, but also as full citizenship, while the Palestinians are lacking both, whatever side of the green line you look at it. So it has been very well received, I would say, very well disseminated, and it gives me hope for the second report, which is on a, let's say, less boring topic.
So I understand that your next report is on Palestinian political prisoners. And I just read somewhere that since 1948, Israel has held about 600,000 Palestinian political prisoners over time. But I understand also from that you're trying to talk not only about political prisoners, but about the whole concept of incarceration and carceral society. So maybe you can talk a bit more about what you intend to do in that report.
Yeah, thank you, Neve. First of all, let me do clarify, because I did not approach the question of the privation of liberty in terms of political prisoners. I didn't look at it this way. So I decided to focus on the privation of liberty, which is first and foremost detention and imprisonment. So the incarceration of individuals, because of its magnitude. In fact, I don't know from 1948, but the figures that recur in literature and among practitioners is of 800,000 Palestinians imprisoned, detained since 1967, and this figure has been circulating since 2006. So it's very conservative. And think of the Palestinian population, which is now about 5 million, but it's now 5 million. Think of how big this has been over time. And just to give you a sense, incarceration, like the privation of liberty, has been massive in connection with Palestinian uprisings. 100,000 Palestinians were arrested during the 5 years of the first Intifada. About 70,000 were arrested during the 6 years of the second Intifada, and another, thousands, can't remember now, but have been arrested during the so-called Unity Intifada. But in fact, what's interesting is the arbitrariness, which I decided to document because it sounded, the fact that, for example, organizations like Al-Haq, B'Tselem, and then Adamir, Defense Children International Palestine, Save the Children, they have been, and even UNICEF, they have been progressively investigating the practices of arresting and detaining Palestinians, very often without charge, without trial. And the patterns of arbitrariness are shocking. So, for example, you have torture, ill treatment being denounced by organizations like Amnesty International, B'Tselem, and Al-Haq since 1989, 1990. So widespread use of torture, which is still somewhat legalized in the Israeli system, applied to the Palestinians out of necessity. Or you have brutal, very well documented, including by videos, interrogations, custodial conditions, and everything gave me the sense of a magnitude of a phenomenon of a magnitude that deserved analysis. So I've studied, for example, the legal reasons that turn Palestinians into so easily detainable. And you will see the report explains how, while Palestinians might and do commit crimes, and there is no justification, most of the criminalization follows conduct that is absolutely not qualifiable as offensive. It's really the manifestation and the exercise of individual freedoms, individual rights, like moving across the territory, or asking for their own rights, or going to school, or using certain books. It's very pervasive, or gatherings, organizing gatherings, vigils, demonstrations. So I conducted an analysis of what I called incarceration governance, and then an analysis of the practices. And they are both haunting in a way, but I also analyzed how this fits into a concept that historian and philosopher Michel Foucault defined carceral archipelago, or carceral continuum. There is a concept of carcerality that some lawyers are really struggling to understand, because I've discussed this idea before writing a report about that. I said, yeah, but why would you discuss the privation of liberty outside jails? Because if you look at how the occupation works in terms of physical containments, meaning the wall, the segregated roads, the settlements, the enclosed military areas, the roadblocks, the checkpoints, the flying checkpoints, there are thousands of daily impediments for the Palestinians. You couple it with the bureaucratic architecture made of permits, hundreds of permits determining how Palestinian and if Palestinian can move, study, access work, cross their own communities, visit family, accessing medical services. And the flip side of it is the bans. Palestinians are easily banned, really, as former Israeli soldiers say, with a push of a button. There is the security service, which can prevent thousands of Palestinians in a matter of seconds from enjoying the rights I just mentioned. And on top of it, there is digital surveillance. If you couple all this is the reality that the Palestinians experience beyond bars, on top of the fact that for many Palestinians, the carcerality experience doesn't end in prisons, because many of them are forced into becoming informant, and especially kids. And there is also the fact that Israel increasingly withhold the bodies of the deceased. There are hundreds of Palestinians who have not been given proper burial for a number of reasons. So, you know, it's very perverse and pervasive, and I decided to analyze it and in a broader context, and led me to conclude that Rashid Khalidi, from a legal point of view, is totally right when he discusses the occupied Palestinian territory as a carceral state.
So maybe by way of conclusion, because we want to leave some time for questions and answers, I mean, once you characterize the Palestinian territories as a carceral society, you also draw links with a kind of global movement, the abolition movement in the United States and in different countries across Europe. And so what kind of links are you creating here, and what kind of similarities and differences do you see between what you're looking at and between other contexts?
Wow, very important question. Let me think. I would say that rather than creating links, I'm borrowing links that are already exposed by other disciplines. Not just, I mean, probably we are, as lawyers, tend to be somewhat narrow, I mean, have our own lens and be very narrowed in our analysis, meaning what is the legal category, etc. Yet fine, the deprivation of liberty very much exists as a category that affects and follows the individual and also masses. At the same time, if you look at what historians and anthropologists and those various scholars who belong to the critical race theory bring to the debate, they've seen how, and they've studied and documented and written wonderful pieces of work on how carcerality, this kind of carcerality leading from Foucault, is typical of settler colonial regimes, meaning the idea of using spatial confinement and surveillance exists, and it was a characteristic of the British colonial experience, for example, and it has been used by others. And so also detaining whomever opposes the regime is not just an old practice, it's very current. And this is why human rights constitute an armor sort of system to push back. And this is why I think that it's important to reconnect the experience of Palestine to other experiences. Look, there is my friend and great scholar, Noura Erekat, who spent the last decade of her scholarly engagement exploring what she calls the intersectionality of the case of Palestine and the Black Lives Matters or other decolonized realities. So this is why this word exists. I'm not creating anything. I'm just trying to make sense of where the scholarship, the wonderful contribution of scholarship is going, and reflect it in my own work as a special rapporteur. Does it make sense?
And so that's wonderful. And due to time, I'm gonna now stop asking questions and kind of open it up both here and to those that are on the web.